talk, I've explored some of the differences between different aspects of incertitude: risk, uncertainty, ambiguity, and ignorance. And in this talk, I'm going to try to explain why these things matter in practice, because there are some very contrasting, concrete methods that can be employed under these different types of dilemma. So to start with, there's the condition of risk, where you simply assume that there are very specific states of the world that might come about, and each can be assigned a probability, and techniques like risk assessment or cost-benefit analysis or optimization modeling offer ways of dealing with calculating what would be the best course of action under those conditions. But the trouble is, under uncertainty or ambiguity or ignorance, those conditions simply don't apply. So by definition, those techniques are not applicable. And often it's said, well, we still have to use them because what else can we do? We don't have other techniques. But actually there are a range of different very practical things that can be done. For instance, under uncertainty, where we don't have confidence in single probabilities, we can still look at what would be the effects of different kinds of assumptions in the calculation or in the model. We use sensitivity testing to explore how the answers you get depend on the assumptions you make and look at the envelope of different possibilities. Likewise, you can use interval analysis or uncertainty factors to be systematic about what happens under pessimistic assumptions and what happens under optimistic assumptions. Or you can be explicit. The precautionary principle, for instance, reminds us that you can be explicit about who exactly has the responsibility of supporting the gathering of evidence or conducting the analysis or being persuasive in the argument in policy making. Where you place that burden gives different kinds of answers. And so another thing you can do on uncertainty is decide which side of the argument should have those burdens. And likewise, under ambiguity, where the problem isn't about probabilities, it's about the fact that different perspectives in society take different views about how to understand the world, or what's valuable in the world, or what options should be pursued, what kinds of policies. And under the conditions of ambiguity, there are again a whole series of different qualitative and quantitative methods that allow us to become more informed and get a more robust understanding of what to do under different types of views. Crucial here is participatory techniques of many, many different kinds, where you gather groups together, especially emphasizing the views of those people or communities who tend to be most neglected and most marginalized, who stand to be most affected by decisions. But you can use techniques here like scenario analysis, where you look at different states of the world that might occur, or backcasting, where you focus in on a particular endpoint that a particular perspective really wants to achieve and work back from that about how to get there. Or you can use interactive modeling, where different perspectives look at the model and explore what answers you get from it if you would take different assumptions depending on their views. And there are techniques like multi-criteria mapping or Q method that map out systematically how different pathways appeal to different kinds of perspective or interest. So there's plenty of things we can do about ambiguity that don't involve using these conventional techniques. And even under ignorance, where the dilemma is we don't know what we don't know, and we face the prospect of radical different kinds of surprise, there are still very concrete things that can be done to be more robust in the face of those dilemmas. For instance, civic research or citizen science, where people themselves get to monitor or conduct surveillance in their environments to pick up if there's a pollution problem or something happening that hasn't been noticed by policymakers or scientists located remotely from the problem. Or we can be systematic about qualities like flexibility and reversibility, to look at different options, different pathways that can be explored, and see which of those could be retreated from if it turns out to be problematic in ways we don't expect at the beginning. Some types of technological pathways, for instance, once you commit to it, it's very difficult to pull out. You get locked in. So we can avoid those kinds of strategies. Or we can be much more valuing of diversity, where we actually don't just do one thing. We don't just pursue one agricultural strategy or one energy strategy. We allow a number of different pathways to be pursued together, where we don't put all our eggs in one basket. The point of all this is not to pretend that we can neatly divide the world up into uncertainty, ambiguity, and ignorance, and then we know what techniques to use. Typically, different techniques will be used in any given situation to address different aspects of the problem. The point of this talk is to say that we don't have to feel forced into always using these mainstream techniques of risk assessment, cost-benefit analysis, because there aren't alternatives, because there are in fact many practical alternatives to deal with uncertainty, ambiguity and ignorance, as well as risk.